Welcome to episode 516 of the Entertainment 2.0 podcast, brought to you by thedigitalmediazone.com. I'm Josh Pollard.
And I'm Richard Gunther. And this is the show that puts you in control of your favorite movies, music, shows, and games. And happy birthday, Josh.
Thanks, Richard. Happy belated birthday to you.
So we didn't record last Tuesday because it was my birthday. And I'm like, I'm not recording on my birthday. And then this Tuesday, I asked you if we want to reschedule. And you're like, no, let's do this. I am totally honored. Either that or you're just ignoring your birthday this year.
No, not ignoring. But, for me, I'm recording this after the kids are in bed anyway. So, and it's the middle of the week. So it's not like there's some big birthday thing that would be happening at this time. So not that big of a deal. As long as I can get the show prepped, I figured it wouldn't be a big deal. And then Jen told me yesterday that she had something planned for tomorrow night. So, and you and I joked earlier that you were like, oh, that she just couldn't get a reservation for Tuesday night. And obviously that's not it, since no restaurants are open. So,
well, I'm glad you're here. I think our listeners are probably glad that you're here because we missed last week, but we are back and we have so much to go through, including that message that last time we said we didn't have time to review, but I think you're going to take this one?
Yes, this is from a good friend. We like to call him Captain Lawn Paul. He frequently writes in to try to convince me to play Sea of Thieves and has other things to contribute. So it was a super long message. I'm going to cut this down a little bit, try to hit the biggest points here. So he says, ahoy, ye scurvy sea dogs. I think we're not sea dogs, right? Like sea dogs would be people who actually go out on boats and stuff, right? Well,
I kind of do. I live on water and I go out on friends' boats when we're allowed to be in the waterways.
Yeah, I do that, but we're not pirates like he is
that's true.
In Sea of Thieves. So I think we're landlubbers, right? Anyway, he says, I've been super busy. This is a combined feedback for the last 2 episodes. So a couple of episodes ago, we talked a lot about the new Google Podcast app, and he says it's the only podcast app he uses. He says, and I love it. I can pause on my phone, then tell my home speakers to resume. Also, Google Podcast is pretty much the only way to listen to a podcast and have the media playback controls in the drop-down menu with the newer Android OS. I don't think that's true. I do that with Pocket Cast all the time. So I'm not sure about that one. Later on, he goes on to say that Sea of Thieves is how he's handling the quarantine. We've been asking everybody, let us know what you're doing. Really the question has been, what are you doing differently to get through the quarantine concerning home media and stuff? So to have Paul tell us that he's using Sea of Thieves, that's not new. Like that's what Paul does. He plays Sea of Thieves. Anyway, he says, have you heard of all the crazy new updates? They just announced the update that's coming at the end of April, and it's big enough to be another game. Sorry, Paul, I'm still not going to play. He says, many are turning to audiobooks while doing housework. I'd like to throw out one of my first audiobook recommendations. It's a great sci-fi by the name of We Are Legion, parentheses, We Are Bob. It's a 3-book series that is absolutely amazing. I'm going to take Paul up on this one. I'm one of those people who's been consuming a lot more audiobooks, and I'm looking for a good one. So We Are Legion is definitely one I'm going to be checking out.
Cool.
And then we had also talked about some of these synchronized video watching services, like people doing watch-alongs of Netflix videos and Hulu's and stuff like that. And we didn't understand why anybody really wanted to do that, because who wants to watch a movie with people who are talking? And he says, you guys couldn't think of a good use of synchronized videos with friends. YouTube. My friends and I love watching YouTube videos while in an Xbox party, and we always try to sync it up. Okay, that's a good use case.
Yeah.
It's not one that I've I mean, I can only think of a handful of times when I've been in an Xbox party and someone's been like, "You've got to see this YouTube video." So that's cool. I'm glad that that's something that is useful for him. But obviously,
It
there isn't this functionality in YouTube yet.
it makes more sense to me than like watching a movie, a full length movie, because I don't want people talking during a movie.
Right. Yeah, but if you're all watching, a 4-minute clip of some hilarious scene in something, okay, fine.
Right.
Sync that up and
Right.
watch that together. And then lastly, he asked if we've checked out the Office Ladies podcast yet. He says it's still great and getting better. Do I remember that you are listening to that one, Richard?
No, I'm not. I no, I am still so behind on podcast. I can't take on more at this point.
My wife was listening to it for a while she had been watching The Office before work, before quarantine, but now she's trying to start work super early in the morning. So she hasn't been watching The Office lately, so she probably hasn't been listening to the podcast. But
Well,
I
and
have
I
heard good
also,
things.
I mean, I'm not watching The Office now. I think this would probably make a whole lot more sense if you were watching The Office, which I'm not doing. And frankly, I liked it, but I didn't like it enough that I would watch it again. I would probably rewatch Friends or How I Met Your Mother or something like that before rewatching The Office.
I might rewatch it. But like if I was someone who actually dedicated a lot of time to watching TV, then it might be something I would rewatch. But I'm not one who does that, so not going to do that.
All right. Well, he sent us this message to our email address at entertainment 2.0 or sorry, entertainment20 at thedigitalmediazone.com. You could also send us your feedback to our feedback form online. That's going to do it for our feedback, though. So let's dive into our topics. We have a lot to talk about because we missed a week and because stuff is getting started to launch in the next couple months. And we're going to talk about a bunch of that. So we'll start with video. First off, and probably I think the biggest industry news is that Fandango is buying Vudu from Walmart. Now, we've known that Walmart was looking for a buyer of Vudu. And I think that Fandango was probably one of the suitors that some people had thrown out as a possibility. Makes complete sense. They're both part of the Movies Anywhere ecosystem. I believe they were both part of the Ultraviolet stuff when it was a thing. And this is probably the most important thing, they both offer movies and TV content. And so what this means to people who are Vudu fans and Vudu subscribers in the short term, and by short term, we're probably talking about a year or so, it means nothing. They have committed to changing close to nothing as far as how Vudu works, that it works as its own application, that it is going to continue to honor any promotions that you already have, any redeem codes, any services that you have, your content that you own, the apps that exist on all the different platforms. Nothing is changing in terms of Vudu services that you already have. They may add features. They may look at combining the capabilities of Fandango and Vudu into a somehow newly branded experience at some point, but that's out in the future. For now, don't expect that anything is going to change. And most importantly, you're not losing anything as a Vudu or Fandango customer.
Yeah. So I have one question for you about this. Which brand do you think has more, which one is more recognizable? Which one do you think more people know about?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I was thinking about that earlier today. I think it would be smart for Fandango to forego the Fandango Movies brand. Keep Fandango as a thing that you use to buy movie tickets
Hmm.
and maybe partner with your product Vudu, but use the Vudu brand for the recognition that it has as probably the leading place to buy content outside of Apple or iTunes.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that makes sense. But I do think that Fandango is the more recognizable brand. I think more people know that brand than Voodoo. But I like where you're going with that, though. That keep what Fandango is known for as what it's known for, and maybe just make a slight change to be like Voodoo by Fandango or something like that.
Right, right. Kind of like Instagram by Facebook, right? And I
Yeah.
get the feeling that, and virtual show of hands here, how many people actually have Fandango movies installed on a device somewhere? I bet it's pretty low.
Yeah. Right. All right, I have one more question for you. I know we're trying to fly through these stories, but I have one more question that just popped in my head. Assuming, this is a big assumption, that all of the movie theaters don't go into bankruptcy and never reopen, and someday we're allowed to go back to movie theaters again.
Well, if you live in Georgia, you can do that next week. So there you go. Are you going to go?
Well, don't live in Georgia, and even if I did, no. Gosh.
Anyway,
Anyway, so in movie theaters, you typically see previews or ads for Fandango. Do you think that Fandango will start advertising Voodoo during the movies at a movie theater? Or does that get
oh,
weird because they're,
yeah, I think that would be actually really smart because what they could do is they could they could advertise how you can like catch up on classics or the movies that you missed or that aren't in theaters anymore. Or yeah, I think there's a way they could absolutely make that work. I like that idea.
but would the movie theaters be mad about it?
But why? Because what they would be offering isn't taking away from what the movie theaters are currently making available to customers. As
Yeah.
long as they're not hitting into each other and competing with each other directly, I don't think it's a problem.
Okay. Yeah. I think you're right. All right, so we're going to move on to a story about HBO. We've talked a little bit about HBO Max in the past, and we finally have a launch date for it. HBO will be launching the new service on May 27th. Now, you might be like me and you saw this headline and thought, wait, what is HBO Max again? Like, I don't understand all of these HBO services. So, a quick recap of what HBO Max is. It is, you can think of it as everything that HBO's got, plus its tie in, it's got that connection because of all the parent ownership stuff with Warner Brothers. So it's HBO stuff plus classic Warner Brothers movies and shows and stuff like that. It's going to be the exclusive online home of Friends, so that when Richard goes to rewatch it, this is where he'll have to do that. And then eventually they're going to have HBO Max exclusive content, but none of that is ready because no one is producing content right now during the quarantine. So if you're thinking, but where does this fit in with HBO Now and HBO Go? Well, this has more content than all of those because HBO Now and HBO Go are just HBO things. And HBO is kind of hoping that you're going to stop using Now and Go and just switch to Max. And the cost of it is $14.99 a month. And this is just a streaming service. This is not like something that's an add-on to your cable bill like normal HBO is. But
Hmm.
but they are trying to work with the online streaming TV services. They, at their announcement last fall, they said they were in close talks with YouTube TV to try and get a partnership there. So that's what HBO Max is. That's, now we know when it's coming. It's coming in just over a month at the end of May.
So you know what also costs $14.99 a month?
HBO.
HBO, which comes with HBO Go, and HBO Now is $14.99 a month. It's exactly the same price. So my question to you is, do you think that finally HBO Now and HBO Go away, and everybody that used those services, which means if you subscribe to HBO or you subscribe to streaming HBO only, that everybody would be using HBO Max?
I think it depends. The article that we'll link to in the show notes talked a little bit about how you could get a pricing break or get it for free depending on like what AT&T services you have. And I don't remember if it said you'll get HBO Max for free if you have HBO through your cable provider. If you do, then I think HBO Now and Go both go away. If you don't, then I think it's Go that you use if you're paying through your cable provider.
Correct.
I think Go sticks around, but HBO Now goes away. Because there's no point in HBO Now, right?
Yeah, I agree. It seems completely redundant unless they're going to maybe tier the pricing and offer HBO Now at some lower price. But I would argue that it never made sense for there to be two completely different systems that offered exactly the same content. So, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, speaking of HBO Go and HBO Now maybe going away, folks who had older generation Apple TVs, like generation 2 or 3, that's the shorter hockey puck as opposed to the tall hockey puck we have now. They were told a while ago that HBO Go and HBO Now were going to go away, that those apps were no longer going to work on Apple TVs that were older. HBO is pulling back on that a little bit. We don't know if this is because of COVID or if this is just aligning with what's going on with their other services that are coming out. But what they have said is that you will now still have HBO Now through the middle of May. May 15th is now when that's going to go away. It is weird that that's, I don't know, 12 days before HBO Max comes out. I don't know why they would have completely different timelines. And then HBO Go will still remain available for a few months. Now, we're only talking the older generation Apple TVs. And if you've had these devices, you probably understand why. Older Apple TVs didn't have an app store. You just got whatever apps were available that Apple had partnered with to make for the Apple TV devices. And so I'll bet that the development environment for those applications is completely different from what you use to build an app that runs on the TV OS that's behind the Apple TV 4 and 4K. So that's my bet for why this was happening. Anyway, they're extending it a little bit longer, and worst case scenario, when they do go away, you're still going to be able to AirPlay stuff from your devices if you have a mobile device, and be able to either AirPlay it or cast it to an Apple TV device.
This to me almost feels like, what's the point? You're going to add a month to to give people the ability an extra month to replace their ancient Apple TV. Like, just go buy a $30 Roku.
Yeah, I think this is COVID related because devices like the Roku, the inexpensive entertainment devices, are now harder to come by
Mm,
because they all sold out when everybody learned that they were going to be home for a couple weeks. A couple weeks. So I think that this is probably to help ease the transition if people do have to get a new device of some sort, or maybe think about using a different service.
yeah. Okay. Well, we're not done talking about new streaming services yet.
No, we're not.
Comcast has launched. They've actually launched it now, right? They've launched Peacock, right?
Well, they've previewed
Oh
Peacock
gosh.
for some Comcast customers. Now, officially, this was supposed to be available to all Comcast customers who use Xfinity, or I forget what the other thing is called. Flex, I think, is the other service that they have. And if you have those services, then Peacock content should be showing up for you on those services. But as I understand it, it hasn't rolled out for absolutely everyone yet. So whether that's a technical glitch or whether that's intentional, this is a soft launch. They're trying to make this content available to their own customers because Peacock is NBC, NBC Comcast, all one company. So they're giving people a chance to try this out. Now, it's going to be available to everybody by mid-July. But this is something that Comcast customers get as an added bonus, which is nice because how often can you say that Comcast is doing something nice, right? So there are 3 tiers of the Peacock service. There's a free tier, which includes a bunch of content, a premium tier that's going to cost $5 a month that includes like twice as much content. And then there's going to be an ad-free tier for another $5, totaling $10 a month. Here's the thing about the ad-free content, or about the premium version with ads. They say there will be a maximum of 5 minutes of advertising an hour. That's awesome.
That's really, really good. Really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I mean, considering that if you're watching standard over-the-air television and you're watching an hour-long show, you're normally getting 42 minutes of a show and 18 minutes of commercials.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that's pretty impressive. Now, the Comcast folks are getting now and will continue to get the premium stuff at no cost. So this is a preview, but it's going to continue to be free for anyone who is a Comcast Xfinity or Flex customer.
Cool.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, we'll see.
I mean, it's cool for Comcast customers.
Yeah, I don't expect that this is something that I'm going to buy into. All the usual stuff. They're going to have originals, but nobody's doing originals right now because production is closed. There you have a lot of content beyond just the normal NBC stuff because, of course, they have all these other networks. But and of course, they have their association with Universal. So it's, I don't know, HBO Max by another mother? Like,
Well, I will almost definitely subscribe to this and probably not HBO Max. And the reason being, this is going to have a Battlestar Galactica series.
they're doing that, huh?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, CBS, for starting this model.
It works sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes. All right. Well, our next story is from Plex. And frankly, like normally Plex stories make it as like the featured thing, the very first thing we're going to talk about. But I decided to put it here because it's a mix of both sort of video and audio stuff. So it's going to transition us really well into our audio stories. So see, kind of clever. Okay, so Plex has got 2 new features that are available right now as long as you're a Plex Pass subscriber. So if you've got Plex Pass, you can go and check these out. The first one is called Plex Dash. It is basically a Plex server management tool for your phone. People for years have been saying there are things that I want to do on my Plex server from my phone. Like if I want to change artwork for movies and album artwork and that sort of stuff, or I just want to see how many people are watching things right now. You can do all of that from this Plex Dash app. You can see the processor utilization graphs and things like that if you really want to get into the weeds. It also has some things like you can view history of what's been played recently, and you could even like remove things from the history. So if you didn't want things showing up, which that's an interesting feature, that's there. They also have a feature that they're calling like ratings. So it's like, these are the top TV shows and the top movies and the top albums. And by top albums, they mean the ones that are getting listened to the most. So all of this is pretty cool. And the app works pretty well, but it's far from perfect. And like for me, I was listening to music on my PC and I was playing a TV show on my tablet, and the now playing thing showed what the music that I was listening to, but it never showed the TV show that I was listening to. So it's not perfect yet. It is very much an initial release. And that's what a lot of the App Store, at least the Google Play Store reviews are saying too. Like it's got, I think it's got an average of like 3.7 stars or something, because for the most part, it works well. But there's a lot of things that they could add to this. So that's Plex Dash.
So in all fairness, both of these that you're going to talk about are labs projects. They're part of the Plex Labs initiative, right? So
Right.
The fact that it doesn't really work quite right yet and it seems very beta. Of course, this is probably not even beta. This is like alpha stuff because it's something they're playing with that they're then trying to figure out, okay, well, what are we going to do with this? Like, how are we going to productize this? And if they even do, right?
Right.
Because I look at this and I'm like, well, why do I have to download something else? Why isn't this just another option in the menu in the Plex app itself?
Right. Yeah, it absolutely could be, and it isn't. And maybe that's because it's easier to just distribute a second app instead of trying to make it all work together.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, no, that makes complete sense.
Okay, so on to the other app that they've released. This isn't really new. It's PlexAmp. We talked about this when they first released PlexAmp last year at some point, where, yeah. Why are your eyes rolling? The PlexAmp isn't a new thing.
I know. I was not a fan.
Then you're probably not going to be a fan of this version either. So I played with it tonight. It is a standalone music player. When I said I was listening to music earlier, I was using PlexAmp, and it's Plex being inspired by the classic Winamp app of the late 90s and early 2000s. And it's just music, pulling music from your Plex library. And I think it will pull from Tidal if you're doing the Tidal integration, but I'm not. So, but it's a pretty good app, I guess. But this just isn't something I use. Maybe I'd be more interested in this if I actually used my Plex music library, but I don't. Like, I can't think of the last time I listened to my music collection from Plex. I only ever listen to Spotify anymore. So I'm not the best person to be giving a review on this app. If you have Plex Pass and you have Plex music that you listen to, go in and grab this app and make the decision for yourself. It's got lots of cool features. They completely rewrote it from before. So if you hated it before or had issues with it, then maybe a lot of those have been addressed and fixed. But it's got cool features like essentially being able to do radio stations where maybe you go to an artist and then you click the little radio button and it plays music from that artist plus similar artists. And that's a nice feature to have. And if you have a big enough music library to make that work well, then cool. They've also got the whole visualization thing that Winamp used to have.
More eye rolls.
Which is fun. It's not super useful, but it's fun. Like, frankly, I think it'd be more useful on the regular Plex app. You know, those visualizations are interesting on my TV, not on my computer while I'm trying to do other work, right? So Plex Amp, it's free if you have Plex Pass, and it's available on basically everything. You know, Windows, Linux, I think Mac, iOS, Android. It's everywhere. So just go ahead and grab it and decide for yourself.
All right. Well, let's move on to some real audio stories. Ooh.
Dang.
All right. So let's start with Sonos. Speaking of radio stations, Sonos has, for some reason, launched its own streaming radio service. So now, as a Sonos owner of any Sonos device, you can get streaming radio through their service, which includes about 30 curated stations that they've created. It also includes featured content that they're making available and calling out. It has a worldwide selection of stations. They have a section that includes your local radio stations. What I can't figure out or understand is, how is this any different from TuneIn Radio or iHeartRadio, which you can already subscribe to at no cost on Sonos? I don't get it.
Does this cost money?
It doesn't cost money. It includes pretty much the same. I mean, I obviously didn't catalog the very likely thousands of stations that they offer against what these others offer. But in all likelihood, there's an aggregation service that's pulling together all the terrestrial radio stations, and they've subscribed to it because they sound just as crappy as the low bandwidth version of the radio stations you're used to hearing on TuneIn and iHeartRadio. So I don't get it. I just don't get it. Their 30 curated stations are pretty good. I like the selection that they have. They have like a lounge station. They have a contemporary country station. They have an electronic station, a bunch of stuff that I would be interested in listening to. They break occasionally for like station identification interruptions, which I found annoying. Just to remind you that you're listening to Sonos Radio station, blah, blah, blah. And then it goes on with whatever. But it's very limited. It's only streaming. You can't, like every other service, not true radio services, but like Pandora and like Spotify and like Apple Music and any of these other services that offer stations, you can't skip a song. You're just listening to it linearly. You can't like or dislike anything to influence how it curates music for you going forward. So I just don't get it. I don't understand.
Yeah, this feels like them like a white labeled service that they slap their name on.
Right. So that they can say that they're adding value to the system that you're paying more and more for as every new device comes out more expensive than its predecessor.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Well, Spotify's got a new feature for its the users that are paying, the premium users. I don't like calling them premium users. It's users of the premium service. I don't think I'm
This is
any
not
more.
me.
No, I don't. But Richard, I don't think I'm any more premium than you are. So, in fact, if we're being honest, you're way more premium than I am. So, so new feature for people who subscribe to Spotify Premium, and that's the ability to. They're calling it hiding songs from playlist, and it sounds logical. It's easier to describe, I suppose, when you call it hiding. So if you've used Spotify before, then you know that lots of the use of it is through playlist, whether that be playlists that you create or some curated playlist that you might want to listen to, or some algorithmically, I can't believe I just got that word out of my mouth the first time, generated playlist that they call like their daily mixes and their release radar and stuff. There are occasionally, fairly frequently, in those playlists that you don't make, songs that you don't want to listen to. And sure, you can skip, but maybe you just don't want to hear them at all. Maybe you're listening to your release radar in the car with your children, and a couple of the songs in there are explicit and you don't want those to be played. So now in all of these playlists that aren't playlists that you made, you can, like from the Android app, long press on the song or click the little meatball menu, the context menu button. And in the big list of options where you would see things like view artist, view album, stuff like that, is an option called hide this song. When you hide it, it doesn't hide it. The song still shows up in the list. It's just that it's basically grayed out, and it will skip over it. So that's the important thing, right? That it doesn't play the song.
Well, so maybe that's so that you can change your mind if you decide that, okay, maybe it's okay to play that.
Yes, and you can very easily unhide a song. I just didn't expect it to still be perfectly visible when it's called hide. I figured there'd be an option somewhere that would say like show hidden songs or something like that.
Yeah. I think this makes a lot of sense. It may be a weird implementation. I understand why they did it that way, but I think that this is a more granular way of handling one of the things that we discussed that these services were rolling out previously. Let's say that there's an artist that you just don't ever want to hear anything from that artist because you dislike their music or you dislike their lifestyle. It turns out this guy's a real jerk and you don't want to support him by streaming his music, so you're going to block it. A lot of services added that feature about a year ago, and this lets you really fine tune that, because maybe it's not that, oh well, I don't hate everything that artist Y did, but I don't necessarily I don't necessarily want to block everything. Maybe I want to hear one or two songs. This lets you adjust that.
Well, and maybe you want to hear those songs just not in those particular playlists.
Oh, and that's a really good way of looking at it too. I think one of the reasons why this is a good feature as well is because in playlists, the concept of thumbing something up or down doesn't really apply, because it's in the playlist. It's going to stay in the playlist.
Right.
So this helps you address that too.
All right. Well, last thing that Spotify is doing is they've been trying to get more and more into the podcast market space, and they are, and they're doing a pretty decent job of it. It seems like I'm hearing a lot of people lately talking about how they've been listening to podcasts on Spotify.
I'll bet there are some people listening to us right now on Spotify.
I sure hope so, because they can. all of our shows are on Spotify.
Yep.
So one thing that they're doing now is they've launched 3 new human curated podcast playlists. And a podcast playlist is kind of an interesting idea for a lot of people, I think, because for a lot of people, they have the podcast they subscribe to. They just want to listen to those. They want to pick out exactly what I'm going to listen to next. They don't want any sort of, ordering things. I'm going to pick what's next for me. I'm not really like that. A lot of my shows come in and I'm like, yep. Throw all of these in a playlist. I don't really care what order they're in. I just want to listen to all of them. This is more that model. Now, but these are human curated, not by you, and they're podcasts that you don't necessarily subscribe to even. So they've got 3 new ones. One is called Best Podcast of the Week. One is called Brain Snacks, and one is called Crime Scene. So first one is fairly obvious. It's somebody at Spotify thinks these are the best episodes of podcast available right now. I opened it up today. I had never heard of any of the podcasts in that list. Now that doesn't mean that it's an invalid list. Like, part of the point of this is discovery, right? But as I looked at the titles and the descriptions and stuff, I was not interested in any of it. Maybe next week will be a better week. Maybe I will agree with these humans next week. But this week, I did not agree with the people curating this playlist.
I guess the thing that I like about the fact that you didn't recognize anything is that maybe that's a sign that someone finally is trying to surface indie podcasters and not just like the Big 10.
Right. Yeah. That would be nice. So maybe eventually we'll end up on that list. Wouldn't that be cool?
Maybe.
Probably not. So Brain Snacks is a playlist of shorter clips. Most of them were like somewhere between 5 and 20 minutes, but most of them in the 5 to 10 minute range. Just quick episodes teaching you something. And then Crime Scene, it's true crime type podcast. So if you're into those things, then that might be a fantastic playlist for you.
It's really curious that they have a very genre specific selection mixed in with these other things that aren't really genre related. It's kind of weird.
It is a little weird, but I have to imagine that they're looking at their analytics and seeing what people are listening to.
Oh yeah.
And
oh
these
yeah.
are the
No,
things.
yep. Good point.
All right. So I guess that takes us to gaming news. So not a ton here. These will be quick hits. So first one, the Nintendo Switch, which, by the way, if you don't have one and you want one, tough. You're not getting one. Like, I was listening to another video game podcast today, and they were talking about the shortages of the Nintendo Switch, and she said, I knew it was bad when I went to Target, and outside of my Target, they have a big sign that says, these are the things we're out of. So that if those are the things you're looking for, you don't even waste your time.
Right.
And
the Switch was on it.
And the Switch is on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
it's paper towels, toilet paper, hand sanitizer,
and the
Nintendo Switch.
Right. That's insane. That's absolutely insane. But it's been that way since this started.
Yeah.
Like, officially by CDC guidelines, we're in week 6 right now. In week 1, you couldn't buy a Switch.
Right. It's kind of bonkers. But anyway, so if you have one, there is a new software update out, version 10, that brings with it a couple of cool features. The first one is that you can finally remap buttons. You can take any of the buttons on the Joy-Cons, the Pro Controller, or of course the Switch Lite, and remap them to however you want them to be. The most obvious one is swapping the A and B buttons to make them match the Xbox One and essentially the PlayStation controller. It's just backwards. And it's not backwards, I guess, if you've lived on Nintendo devices your whole life. But if you're trying to go back and forth between a Switch and an Xbox, it is real confusing. So you could do that if you wanted. It also opens up a lot of possibilities for people with disabilities, people who don't necessarily hold a controller the same way I do and can't use a controller the same way I do. This allows more accessibility, and so that's always a good thing. The other feature that they added, this is absolutely mind-blowing, that the Switch has been out for 3 years, and this feature is just now coming to it. It's a system with very limited storage. It only has 32 gigs of internal storage. And so they allow you to have micro SD cards. You can store your games on SD cards. But previously, if you installed a game on your main system and wanted to move it to the SD card, you'd have to re-download the game from the internet. What? Now you can move them like in a logical way. Just copy it from the internal system to the SD card.
I cannot believe that this was not possible. The Nintendo devices for generations have been built with SD card memory as one of their features, and you couldn't do this from the beginning?
Not in a way that made sense.
Oh, unbelievable.
Yeah. So now at least it makes sense. Although mostly because there's still a lot of like save game data. A lot of times you can't copy that to your SD card. Why? Don't know. They just don't let you. Like if you had a Switch and you're buying another one and you want to copy your save game around, you can't. Like it's so dumb. It's so dumb. Like Nintendo is so bad at so many things that make gamers' lives easier and better. And which is one of the reasons why I took so long to get a Switch, because I just didn't want to deal with this sort of crap. Yeah, 3 years in, now you can copy your games in a way that actually makes sense. All right, next news story. This one is fairly obvious. I think we all expected it. Gamescom is, in terms of attendance, it is by far the biggest game conference of the year. It is way bigger than E3 in terms of attendance because it's always been open to the public. So hundreds of thousands of people go to Cologne, Germany every year for Gamescom in August. Well, Germany announced that all large events are banned through the month of August. So Gamescom had to say, I guess we're not doing Gamescom then. So no in-person physical Gamescom this year. They are going to do it as a digital event, but you will not be able to get your hands on a console to play those new games right before they come out on the next generation system. So that's what stinks about these conferences closing right now, is that you're not going to be able to play those things early.
So 2 things here. One, I am really looking forward to hearing about conferences that manage to pull this digital thing off well, because really, other than something that ended just today, an Android developer thing, I don't know who was putting it on, but I hadn't heard anything about these actually being good. Most of them being just real sleepers because nobody knows how to do this yet. Right. So I think that it's going to be interesting watching some of the best practices as conferences try to go virtual. Thing 2, we talked about this offline last time. Things have gotten more real in the last 2 weeks. Any bets on when next year's CES gets called off?
So you've moved to the camp that CES isn't happening?
Yeah.
I don't want to think like that, but it does feel like a fairly high probability. But I think it's late summer that they cancel it. And I don't think any sooner than that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking, I don't know. I think we will know sometime in July
You think that early?
because that's when people are making. If you're building a booth for CES, you're spending a ton of money to build it, to design it, to plan it,
Mm-hmm.
to get all this stuff together and all the resources that are involved in that. And I think they're aware of the loss that people will suffer, that the companies will suffer if they end up putting all that effort in and then can't do anything with it. So I think they're going to have to cancel earlier rather than later when, not if, when they cancel. I've already made the decision that I'm not going to South by next year.
If there was a CES, would you be going to CES?
I will not go to next year's CES.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of how I'm feeling too.
Yeah.
It makes me even more sad that I missed this year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Way to bring the
So
show down. Gosh,
I know,
Richard.
I know.
On my
So Java
birthday.
Roaster in the chat is saying, I think there's so much money involved that the CEA won't announce a cancellation until the last possible minute. I don't know. I mean, that's a rough problem to deal with, right? Like that is what South by did, and everybody got screwed by it.
Right.
Everybody.
Yeah. Well, and what is the last possible minute?
Well, hopefully not 6 days before it starts.
Right, like Christmas
South
Eve.
Right, right.
We're going to announce this on Christmas Eve so that it gets buried in the news. Oh my gosh. That would be insane.
Oh man. Anyway. Yeah. All right.
Okay, so that's it for our gaming news. So that means that's it for all of our news for this week, which means that we're going to get into what's going on in our entertainment centers. And since it's been 2 weeks, Richard has a lot. I even have a lot, but Richard has a whole lot.
So much. So much. So we'll talk about this later, but I have been looking for diversions. I have been procrastinating, doing anything that would be normal. I've been trying to like break out of the normal because my normal looks like every other day normally would. And I'm getting kind of tired of, and by that I mean I work from home. I grew up an only child. I'm used to kind of being home alone all the time. Now I'm not alone, but the point is this isn't much different for me, but it is starting to wear a little bit. And so I've been looking for things to kind of break out of the habit. And I've been watching a little bit more TV, doing a little bit more projects. And so on the TV side, Modern Family, the season and series ended. Watched the finale and the after show for that. I thought that was entertaining. I was happy with it. Nothing major, nothing huge. They didn't do any cool little last minute spoofs or anything, but it was satisfying. The New Amsterdam season finale that I talked about last time, they did show that. Interestingly, they had the lead from that show introduce the show and talk about not showing the pandemic episode from a webcam. Like he was just at a desk talking to you, telling you what they did and why they did it. And we're going to show you this show, but to understand what's going on, you're going to have to see a couple scenes with this character in it so that you'll get why he's there in this episode. So he kind of walked you through that, and then they played the normal episode. I think it was really well handled. I think they did a good job with
Good.
it. And ultimately, it was a good season finale. I love this show. I think it's so well done. Also watched a ton of The Flash and Arrow. It was the Arrow finale. That was really good. They did a fantastic job, I think, with the Arrow finale. And based on other stuff that had happened leading up to that, they were now in a position where they could pull together all of these people into that Arrow finale to make it work really well. Amongst the stuff that was in the Flash and Arrow stuff was their annual crossover episode. And man, they blew the budget on this. I didn't particularly like it. I thought it was confusing and contrived, but they had 5 different series involved in this now. So it was The Flash, Arrow, Legends, Supergirl, and Batwoman. All of those series all together, each one had an episode that was part of this like Crisis on Earth cross promotional thing that they did, crossover special. They also included characters from Black Lightning. They had the guy who was the Flash in the 90s series Flash. They had the guy who plays Lucifer from the TV show Lucifer. They had the guy who, well, so they had a nod to Superman Returns because one of the actors in Legends was actually Superman in Superman Returns, and they had a nod to that in this episode. And they had a nod to the Justice League movie, all with like tons of effects and everything. I can't imagine what they spent on this crossover event. And all in all, I mean, like all that money, all that effort, all those crossover people, and it was just okay. So
Maybe
yeah.
it was too much.
Yeah, maybe it was. I mean, it was cool when you saw different people. I'm like, oh my God, they brought in Lucifer. Oh my God, that's like because he was Superman before. I mean, it was really cool how they did all that. But yeah, anyway, Homeland and Westworld continue on. Really, really good. Only one episode of Homeland left. I'm so bummed because it has been just exceptional, and I'm so sad to see it go away. I got back to For All Mankind. This is the historical science fiction series on Apple TV Plus, where what if the USSR had landed on the moon first? And how would that impact things? And it's something I started to watch and lost interest in because the pilot really wasn't all that exciting. But I'm back into it now and I'm enjoying it. Watched a couple episodes of what I think most of the world refers to as Extreme Home Makeover. I think it's actually called Extreme Makeover Home Edition. But that has actually been brought back by HGTV, now hosted by, for some reason, the guy from Modern Family. And it's good. It's really good. And one of the things that's interesting is they actually make over homes. They don't just tear them down and start over again, like the last series eventually ended up doing. So I've been enjoying that, and we've watched some more Grace and Frankie, some more our Cartoon President. I've watched some more Cheers. We've watched some more Last Week Tonight, and I don't know if you knew about this or not, Josh, but Saturday Night Live did an experimental at-home episode where everybody was on their webcams and they acted out skits. It was interesting. It was daring. I love to see them experiment with stuff like that, and it'll be curious to see if they can figure out how to make it work better. And once again, everybody sounded like crap.
Come on.
I know. Okay. So finally, we had the Apollo 13 anniversary last week. Last week was the week it had launched and failed and came back home all safely in probably what is one of the most, I don't know, harrowing. I don't know if that's the right word, but one of the missions that I think makes people realize just how amazing people are, how amazing NASA is, how ingenious and the spirit that people can have to get behind and support and make something happen that's really important. Apollo in Real Time, the site that I mentioned before that had played all of the tracks of the audio from Apollo 11, also did the same thing for Apollo 13. So the entire time that it would have been happening 50 years ago, if you don't follow me on Twitter, you don't know this, but if you do know this, because I was tweeting a lot about what was going on. And I, listened to the whole thing. It was on 24/7 in my office, just at all times. I was able to follow along what happened 50 years later. So cool. Loved it. Also watched the series, or not series, the video that NASA put out. I think it's on YouTube, called Apollo 13 Home Safe, with some new interviews with some of the people that are still around. So really, really cool stuff. And that's it for all I have been watching. But two things that I wanted to mention. One is that I have re-enabled Spotify. And so I'm now listening to the free version of Spotify in Sonos and on the app and stuff like that. And wow, it's really annoying with the ads. I kind of forgot how annoying the ads were.
It's been years since I've heard Spotify ads, so
yeah, they're awful. they're awful. You listen to the same one every break.
Oh,
every single break.
That is terrible.
Speaking of ads, and you had mentioned something very much like this. I had this in my notes before you even tweeted about this, but I swear, if I see one more ad with the copy "now more than ever," or "during these times," or "we're here for you," I am just going to friggin' explode.
Yes. So sick of those phrases.
And granted, some of these ads are really good. And consider that companies had to pivot nearly immediately from their standard daily advertising campaigns when they suddenly sounded tone deaf, and had to come up with something that was more appropriate. And by the way, film and produce them when most people aren't working.
Right.
So how do you make that happen? So most of them are scenes with voiceovers, and the voiceovers always have these awful scripts. Honestly, I think some of the best ones, my favorite of these is probably the Uber ad. I think the Uber ad of people just doing stuff in their homes and with their families is probably one of the best ads there. But the winner, in my opinion, Burger King. Burger King has, I think, the best COVID ad. If you haven't seen it, hopefully you can get it on YouTube or something. They are basically cheering for you being a couch potato. And I love it. I just think it's very, very clever.
Cool. I have not seen it. Now I'm going to have to go and look it up, and I will find it in YouTube and put it in the show notes.
All right. So that's a lot, but that is what I have been up to. So Josh, how about you? I believe that that you've been watching more TV.
I have. You probably cheated and looked at my list, but
I saw that you have a list here. I'm trying not to look at it.
Okay.
I'm it's below the fold.
Okay, don't scroll. I have games. I have TV. I even have movies. I've got a lot here, so I guess that's what happens when we take 2 weeks. In terms of games, I think I've played more than what I listed here, but I couldn't remember what else I played, and I didn't have time to fire up my Xbox tonight and find out. But of course, some NHL 20, kind of got back into NHL, which has been nice. A lot of Warzone, the new mode from Call of Duty. That game is so fun. And then also the main group of guys that I play with, who I've played a lot of The Division with, kind of looking for something different. And Toe Jam and Earl was on sale, so we bought Toe Jam and Earl. It was like $2.50 or something, and it was supposed to have 4-player online co-op. So we're like, cool, let's just buy it. It's so cheap, why not? Don't. It's like the multiplayer functionality. It's bad. It's really broken. It's almost like Nintendo made this and they didn't. So yeah, don't. Like, by yourself or maybe couch co-op, which is how the game, like this is a remake of a Sega Genesis game. So couch co-op is probably good, but for online co-op, don't do this. It's too buggy. Yeah. So that's it for games. I finally started watching Homeland over the last couple of weeks.
Yay!
Wow. Every single episode is just, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to say much more, but so the one thing I'll say is there's the episode with the helicopters. Kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And that was very shocking. And that was the episode that I had to finish the night with. Like I finished that because it was like 10:45, and I look at Jen and I'm like, I can't stay up any longer. But how do I leave it on this episode?
Yep.
It's so good. You're right. It's really, really good, and I'm really sad that this is the last season. But at least it's going out like on a high note so far. I think I'm 6 episodes in. So
yeah, it's phenomenal.
So good. We also watched a movie. I don't remember what night, but Jen, I think it was Friday, sort of an at-home date night. Jen and I decided we'd stay home and watch a movie. I let her pick this movie. Spider-Man, Far From Home. Jen is the way bigger like Marvel Cinematic Universe fan than I am. It's sort of there, but it's Sony, so it's not totally there.
You realize how jealous so many of our listeners are of you right now? Your wife
right.
is the one that wants to watch the superhero movies.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So I will pass that on to her. Tony's agreeing with you in the chat.
Right. Best wife ever, Tony says.
Best wife ever. They're absolutely right. I'm sorry. Sorry, people. I've got the best wife ever. And if you had tasted the brownies that she made for my birthday, you would also be agreeing. So, yeah. Anyway, so Spider-Man Far From Home. It was good. I didn't love it. It felt like... It felt very obvious that it wasn't an MCU movie. Like this just would have been a better movie with a few more of the Avengers in it. But it was fun. The Peter Tingle references were hilarious. So yeah, it's good. Like, frankly, I think I still enjoyed it more than some of the mainstream MCU movies. So, like, I definitely liked it more than Guardians of the Galaxy. Anyway, and
I think they've done a good job of developing his character, and
he's
supported by really good characters as well.
Yes, absolutely. And then we also watched the Disney Family Sing-Along. I thought for sure that this would be on your list of things that you watched.
Oh, that... No, I did not.
Did you record it?
No.
It was fun.
I didn't.
And
I didn't.
So it was basically... It was hosted by Ryan Seacrest, unfortunately. And then...
Ouch!
it was... some of the actors or voice people from Disney stuff, and some of it was just like fans, like Beyonce sang a song and stuff like that. And which, by the way, Beyonce got on, and my 12-year-old daughter, who's a singer, was like, "Who's that?" We're like, "How do you not know who Beyonce is?" Apparently, we've screwed up somewhere along the way, but it was fairly well done. It sounds like it was better executed than Saturday Night Live and most of the news programs you're watching. Most of them had decent audio setups. Some of them were really well done. There was like a dude who I guess is from Dancing with the Stars, like one of the professional dancers from there, did the opening one with like all of this incredible choreographed dancing and stuff. It was like, if you can go out and find it again, I think you would love it, Richard. Maybe you're not going to be singing it in your living room, but I think you would like it.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I have just not been even remotely excited by all of these musical entertainment things that have been happening online, largely from people's homes. Oh, look, here's, 3 of Keith Urban singing to you from a fake stage in his basement. I don't care. Like, it's not at all appealing to me. And frankly, that's not the kind of distraction that I'm looking for. I don't want distraction that reminds me that everybody's home.
That's a super valid point. Right. I've been enjoying it, but I've been struggling to find what I actually want. Like there is he's definitely a lesser known artist, but Nashville guy who's bigger in the like Christian and worship music scene, who's been doing a lot of live streams from home and stuff, and they've been really good. I've watched a couple of them and they've been really good. But some of these big events, like, I got notified of the thing that happened this last weekend. It's like Taylor Swift is going to be on.
Right.
Okay. What time? This is like an 8-hour event. What time is Taylor Swift?
No, it's like Live Aid. You had to watch all 18 hours, or I think this was only 8 hours, but whatever. You had to watch the whole thing. They probably teased Taylor Swift at each commercial break.
Right. Because my family probably would have loved to have watched Taylor Swift, but we just didn't tune into any of it because you have to sit through a bunch of artists that you don't care about. So
You were going to say crap. You have to sit through a bunch of crap.
It's not all crap though. Like there were definitely artists that were on that thing this weekend that I would have wanted to watch, but without a schedule, like, cause I got stuff going on. I'm not going to turn on an 8-hour concert and watch it all day long.
Right.
Sorry, not going to work. Anyway, so that's everything that I've been watching and playing, and hopefully some of that will continue over the weekend. Like, I think there's a darn good chance that I get caught up on Homeland because I've been watching it whenever possible because of how good it is. Okay, cool. So that's going to do it for really the entire show tonight. So if you want to get a hold of us, we're on Twitter. Richard is at Richard Gunther. I'm at Josh Pollard. The website is at DigiMediaZone. We're other places, Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. All of the details are over in the show notes at thedigitalmediazone.com. We've also got another great podcast for you to listen to. It's Richard's
Other comes
show.
Out.
I'm glad. Sure. So it's called Home On. It's Richard's other show. He teased it last week. Didn't you say the last time we recorded that you thought that episode would be out at about the same time as our last?
Did I mention that I've been procrastinating? I've been procrastinating. I've been cleaning closets and drawers that I haven't explored in years. And I've just been doing everything but the stuff that I'm supposed to be doing. I will get this out. I will. I need to get my head on.
There you go. Cool. All right. And then we typically do the show live, usually on Tuesday nights at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Follow us on Twitter to know for sure when it's going to be on. We've got some new people in the chat room tonight. That's been a lot of fun. Oh, Java Roaster in the chat said that Disney sing-along thing is on Disney Plus. So everyone in America has Disney Plus. So you have no reason not to go and find it, right?
Awesome.
So, but that's going to do it for episode 516. He's Richard Gunther and I'm Josh Pollard. Thanks for listening to Entertainment 2.0. Adios.
Goodbye.